"I'm all alone," the young Apache woman cried when the cowboy found her wagon in the rain. The rain came down in heavy sheets, turning the wide plains into a wet, slippery mess. The sky was a deep gray, and the wind pushed the raindrops against everything in its path. The mud underfoot sucked at boots and wagon wheels alike. Amid the storm, a lone wagon stood abandoned on the trail. Its wooden wheels creaked and groaned as the rain soaked through the canvas covering. Inside the wagon, a young Apache woman clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her long dark hair was plastered to her face, and tears mingled with the rain as she sat shivering beside her overturned supplies. She had been traveling alone for days. The world around her felt vast and dangerous. Her family and tribe had been caught in a sudden conflict with settlers who had come too close to their land, and in the chaos, she had lost her way. Her heart ached not just from the cold and hunger, but from the deep emptiness of being truly alone. The wind howled around her, and the rain seemed to mock her. "I'm all alone," she whispered, her voice almost drowned out by the storm. Each day of travel had tested her strength. Her horse had fallen ill, and she had been forced to walk alongside the wagon, steering it carefully along the muddy trails. She had no map, no clear direction, and no one to call for help. The plains, though beautiful at other times, now seemed endless and merciless. Every sound, the crash of thunder, the rustle of leaves, the splashing of water underfoot, made her heart jump with fear. Yet even in her fear, she kept moving. Apache women were strong, she reminded herself. They were survivors. She would survive this too. As she tried to adjust the wagon cover to keep her few belongings dry, a sudden crack of thunder startled her. Her hands trembled and she hugged her knees to her chest, wishing she had someone by her side. She thought of her family, her parents, her siblings, and the elders of her tribe, and her chest tightened with longing. She could almost hear her mother's voice, soft and soothing, telling her to stay calm. But the plains offered no comfort, no warmth, only the cold, unyielding rain. She cried silently, her tears mixing with the rainwater that ran down her face. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of hooves echoed faintly. She froze, unsure whether it was a friend or a stranger. Her heart pounded, and she clutched the wooden side of the wagon as the sound drew closer. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure approaching through the gray curtain of rain. It was a man on horseback, dressed in worn clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that did little to protect him from the storm. His horse struggled through the mud, slipping slightly as the rider guided it carefully. The young woman's first instinct was to hide, but the mud made it impossible to run. She could only sit and watch, hope flickering faintly in her chest. The man stopped a short distance from the wagon and looked around. His eyes were sharp, scanning the area as if he could see through the rain itself. When he noticed her, he reined in his horse and called out in a calm, steady voice, "Are you all right?" The young woman flinched at the sound, unsure if she should answer. She wanted to trust him, but years of learning about strangers had taught her caution. Yet there was something in his voice, a quiet kindness, that made her hesitate. Finally, she nodded slightly, her voice barely audible above the rain. I am alone." He carried a small bag slung over his shoulder and moved with practiced ease despite the storm. Kneeling a short distance away to appear non-threatening, he said, "It's all right. You're not alone anymore. I can help." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity. The young woman's eyes widened. Help. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be helped, to be cared for. She sniffled, wiping her face with a sleeve, and tried to speak, but the rain drowned out her words. He slowly approached the wagon, careful not to startle her. She watched every step, unsure of whether to trust him completely. The cowboy noticed her fear and kept his movements deliberate and gentle. He pointed to a dry spot under a tree where the rain barely touched the ground. "Come over here," he said. "You can stay out of the rain for a while." Hesitating, she gathered what little courage she had and stepped toward him, feeling the mud squish under her boots. Every movement was slow and cautious. Finally, she settled under the tree, the rain falling in sheets just a few feet away. The cowboy reached into his bag and pulled out a small blanket. "Here," he said. "Wrap this around you. It won't stop the rain completely, but it'll keep you warmer." She took it with shaking hands and wrapped it tightly around her shoulders. The warmth was comforting, and for the first time in days, she felt a little safer. The cowboy offered her a piece of bread and a small flask of water. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept food from a stranger, but hunger won over fear. She took a small bite, and the bread, simple as it was, felt like a feast. As she ate, the cowboy sat a short distance away, keeping watch and giving her space. She studied him carefully. His face was weathered from years in the sun, and his eyes had a calm steadiness. There was no threat there, only a quiet patience. He spoke softly, telling her about the storm, about the plains, and about how he had traveled these lands for years. His voice was steady and reassuring, and it reminded her of her father's calm tone when he taught her how to ride a horse as a child. Slowly, the tension in her shoulders eased, and she allowed herself to listen, even to smile faintly. The storm continued outside, but under the tree there was a small pocket of safety. They did not speak much, but the silence was comfortable. Occasionally, she would glance at him and wonder why he had stopped for her. Cowboys were known for their toughness, their independence. Why had he chosen to help a lone Apache woman in the rain? But there was no time to question too deeply. Survival came first. Night began to fall, though the storm made it hard to see. The young woman was exhausted, her body trembling from cold and fatigue. The cowboy noticed and offered to help her move to a safer spot nearby, where his wagon provided more shelter. Together, they pushed the small wagon to a flat area where the canvas offered better protection. He secured it carefully, making sure the wheels were stable and the contents inside would not get wet. She watched him work, impressed by his skill, and felt a growing sense of trust. Finally, they settled beside the wagon. The young woman leaned back against it, wrapped in the blanket, while the cowboy sat nearby. They shared a quiet moment, listening to the rain and the distant rumble of thunder. She thought about how lonely she had felt before he arrived and how suddenly her world felt a little less frightening. She realized that sometimes help could come from unexpected places, and that even in the middle of a storm, human kindness could shine brightly. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to rest. Her eyelids grew heavy, and the blanket around her shoulders was comforting. The cowboy stayed awake a little longer, keeping watch as the rain fell relentlessly. He knew the plains could be cruel, and he wanted to make sure she was safe. The night was long, but for the young Apache woman, it was the first night she had felt protected in a long time. And for the cowboy, it was a reminder that even in a harsh world, helping someone in need was worth every effort. As the rain continued to fall, washing over the plains and drenching everything, there was a small sense of peace under the wagon and the tree. Two people from different worlds had come together, drawn by circumstance, and in the middle of a storm, they found a fragile sense of companionship. The night was dark and wet, but it was also a night of hope, a hope that even in the most desperate situations, no one had to face the storm completely alone. And in that moment, under the shadow of rain and clouds, the young woman whispered again, not with fear this time, but with a faint sense of relief, "Maybe I'm not all alone." The young Apache woman awoke with a stiff body, but a sense of cautious hope had replaced the fear that had filled her the night before. She looked over at the cowboy, who was already awake, his horse tethered nearby, scanning the horizon. He noticed her stirring and offered a small, reassuring smile. "You slept well," he said, his voice calm and steady. She nodded, wrapping the blanket more tightly around her shoulders. "Better than last night," she admitted quietly. She was not used to trusting anyone, but his calm presence made her feel safe. There was still wariness in her eyes, a shadow of past experiences with strangers, but it was fading little by little. The cowboy adjusted the wagon's cover and checked the horse's condition. "We should move before the sun gets too high. The plains can dry quickly, but the mud can be tricky if we wait too long," he explained. The young woman listened, appreciating his thoughtfulness and the way he considered her safety as well as his own. She nodded and began helping him, pushing the wagon carefully along the slippery path. As they traveled, the silence between them was comfortable, broken only by the sound of wheels in the mud, the horse's hooves, and the occasional call of a distant bird. Neither of them spoke much, but their movements began to synchronize as they worked together. She felt a strange sense of companionship forming, a bond that had started in the storm and was growing as they shared this journey. Eventually, the cowboy spoke. "My name's Luke," he said simply. "What's yours?" She hesitated for a moment, still cautious, but the warmth in his voice encouraged her to answer. "Nakamis," she said softly. It was the name her mother had given her, meaning granddaughter of the moon. She rarely introduced herself to strangers, but something about Luke made her feel safe enough to share it. Luke nodded as if the name itself carried meaning. "Nakamis," he repeated. "A good name. I can see why your family must be proud." She felt a small smile tug at her lips. Compliments from strangers were rare, and somehow his words felt genuine. The journey was not easy. The plains, though beautiful, were filled with challenges. Puddles of rainwater hid deep holes, and slick mud threatened to trap the wagon's wheels. At one point, the horse stumbled, nearly throwing Luke off. Nakamis rushed to steady it, her hands gripping the reins tightly. Together, they managed to pull the wagon free, panting and wet but relieved. The small victories in the harsh landscape brought a sense of teamwork and trust that neither of them had expected. As they rested for a short while under a sparse group of trees, Nakamis shared a little of her story. She spoke of her family, of the sudden conflict that separated her from them, and of the fear she had felt being alone on the plains. Luke listened quietly, never interrupting, allowing her words to settle in the air. When she finished, he offered a few words of comfort. "It's not fair what happened to you, but you're strong. You'll find your family, and we'll make sure you get there safely." She nodded, wiping a tear that had escaped despite her efforts. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me. The plains are wide, and we have a long way to go before we find any signs of your tribe." Birds called from the trees, and the smell of wet earth and fresh grass filled the air. Nakamis felt a small spark of hope rising inside her. Perhaps she was not entirely alone after all. By midday, they stopped near a small stream to rest and refill their water. Nakamis knelt by the water, cupping her hands to drink, while Luke cleaned the wagon wheels. "The river isn't far from here," he said. "If we follow it, it might lead us to a settlement, or at least a trail that could take us closer to your tribe." "I couldn't just leave you." She nodded slowly, her trust growing, though she still kept a careful distance. The afternoon brought new challenges. They came across a narrow valley where the stream had overflowed, creating a shallow but wide river. The current was stronger than expected, and the muddy banks made it difficult for the wagon to cross. Luke examined the water carefully, testing the depth with a stick. "We can do this," he said, determination in his voice. "But you'll need to help me guide the wagon through. Keep your balance and stay close." The water lapped at their boots and splashed over the wheels, but with teamwork and steady nerves, they made it safely to the other side. She felt a rush of relief and accomplishment. "We did it," she said, her voice full of wonder and a small smile breaking through. Luke nodded, clapping her lightly on the shoulder. "See, you're stronger than you think." The warmth of the fire was comforting, and the smell of smoke mixed with the wet earth gave a sense of security. Sitting by the fire, Nakamis shared small details about her life, her favorite memories with her family, her childhood games, and her love for the quiet beauty of the plains. Luke listened attentively, occasionally sharing stories of his own life, traveling alone as a cowboy, facing harsh winters, and the solitude that came with wandering the frontier. She noticed that, despite his tough exterior, there was a gentleness in him when he spoke of people and life. As night fell and the fire crackled, Nakamis felt a sense of calm she had not experienced in days. She looked at Luke and realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was not consumed by fear or loneliness. There was trust now, built slowly through shared struggles, small victories, and quiet conversations. They had formed an uneasy but growing companionship, one that gave both of them hope for the journey ahead. The night was filled with the sounds of the plains, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, and the steady crackle of the fire. Nakamis lay wrapped in her blanket, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. Luke kept watch for a while, his eyes scanning the dark horizon, ensuring that no danger approached. He knew the plains were unpredictable, and though he trusted her strength, he would not risk her safety. Eventually, the young woman drifted into a light sleep, her dreams filled with faint memories of her family and the life she hoped to reclaim. For Luke, the night was a reminder that even in a harsh world, moments of human kindness and trust could make the journey worthwhile. They were two strangers from different worlds, brought together by circumstance, now learning to rely on each other. And as the moon rose above the plains, casting a soft glow over the damp grass and trees, there was a quiet understanding between them. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but together, they could face whatever challenges awaited. Trust had been built, hope had been restored, and the journey toward reunion and safety had begun in earnest. The first rays of dawn promised a new day, a day where they would travel further, encounter new challenges, and continue to forge the fragile bond that had started under the rainstorm. Nakamis felt it deep within her heart. She was not truly alone anymore, and perhaps, for the first time in a long while, she could believe that everything might turn out all right. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the plains, casting long, golden rays across the wet grass. The storm from the previous days had left the land glistening, yet the trails remained slick and treacherous. Nakamis woke with a renewed sense of determination. She knew her family was out there somewhere and she could no longer linger. Luke was already up, checking the horse and making sure the wagon was in order. He looked over at her and nodded. Ready. Together they began their journey once more, carefully navigating the muddy trails. Each step was a challenge. The wagon's wheels sank into soft spots and the horse struggled to maintain footing. Yet they persevered, helping each other where they could. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the sounds of nature waking up, the chirping of birds, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant call of animals searching for food. As they traveled, the plains began to change. Rolling hills rose ahead, dotted with clusters of trees and boulders. The terrain grew rougher, and the narrow paths made the journey slower and more difficult. Nakamis guided the horse through rocky patches while Luke helped steady the wagon. "Careful here," he warned. "One wrong step and the wagon could tip." She nodded, focusing on each movement, feeling a sense of teamwork that strengthened with every challenge. They soon reached a shallow river, its waters clear and sparkling under the morning sun. But the recent rain had swelled the current, making the crossing more dangerous. Luke tested the river with a stick, estimating the depth and strength of the flow. "It's manageable," he said, "but we'll need to work together to get the wagon across safely." Nakamis took a deep breath and followed his instructions, guiding the horse while he steadied the wagon. Step by careful step, they made it across, soaked and exhausted but relieved. After the river, they found a small clearing to rest. Luke unpacked a few simple supplies while Nakamis examined the landscape, looking for signs of her tribe. She thought about her family, her parents, siblings, and elders, and the fear that had gripped her when she was alone. But traveling with Luke made her feel stronger. His presence was reassuring, and she realized that she could face the challenges ahead with someone by her side. While they rested, Nakamis shared stories from her childhood. She spoke of her home, the lessons her parents taught her, and the games she played with her siblings. Luke listened attentively, occasionally offering his own experiences from life on the plains. "Life out here can be harsh," he said, "but moments like this remind you why it's worth living." Nakamis smiled faintly, appreciating the companionship and the chance to share her thoughts. As the sun climbed higher, they continued their journey. The plains were wide and empty. and the isolation made every sound seem louder: the creaking of the wagon, the horse's hooves in the mud, and the occasional call of distant animals. They encountered small challenges along the way: fallen trees blocking the path, muddy patches that threatened to trap the wagon, and steep inclines that tested their strength. Each obstacle required cooperation and careful planning, strengthening their bond further. By late afternoon, the sky darkened once more, signaling another approaching storm. Dark clouds rolled in, and a cool wind began to blow. Nakamis and Luke hurried to find shelter, spotting a small grove of trees near a gentle slope. They set up camp quickly, securing the wagon and gathering firewood. The storm arrived with a sudden intensity, rain pelting the ground and wind whipping through the trees. Nakamis shivered under her blanket, grateful for the small fire Luke had managed to start. Sitting by the fire, they shared a simple meal of bread and dried meat. Nakamis felt a growing sense of trust and gratitude toward Luke. He had become more than just a helper. He was a companion, someone who cared for her well-being. She realized that the plains, though vast and dangerous, were not as lonely as she had feared. With him by her side, she could face whatever lay ahead. The storm raged through the night, and they took turns keeping watch. Luke scanned the horizon, alert for any signs of danger, while Nakamis rested under the safety of the wagon's canvas. She thought about her family and the journey ahead, feeling a mixture of hope and anxiety. The world was unpredictable, but the bond she had formed with Luke gave her the courage to continue. Morning came, and the storm had passed, leaving the plains fresh and glistening. They resumed their journey, following the trail that Luke hoped would lead them closer to Nakamis's tribe. The terrain grew more challenging as they encountered hills, rocky paths, and dense patches of forest. Each obstacle tested their endurance and problem-solving skills. Nakamis learned to anticipate the horse's movements and adjust the wagon's direction, while Luke offered guidance and support. Together, they navigated the difficult landscape with determination. During a brief rest, Nakamis spoke of her fears. "I worry we might not find my family," she admitted. Luke listened carefully. "It's natural to feel that way," he said. "But we'll keep moving step by step. You're strong, and I'll be here to help." His words brought her comfort, reminding her that even in the vast, unpredictable plains, she was not alone. As they traveled, they encountered signs of wildlife, tracks in the mud, distant calls of birds, and the occasional glimpse of deer. These signs reminded Nakamis of the natural world around her, and she felt a sense of connection to the land she had known as a child. Luke, too, appreciated the beauty and danger of the plains, recognizing the delicate balance of survival and coexistence. Late in the afternoon, they reached a steep incline. The wagon struggled to ascend, the wheels sinking into the soft ground. Luke instructed Nakamis on how to shift her weight and guide the horse. With careful coordination, they managed to reach the top, breathing heavily but feeling a sense of accomplishment. The view from the hilltop was breathtaking, rolling plains stretching endlessly, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Nakamis felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. As night approached, they found another clearing to set up camp. Luke tended to the horse and prepared the fire, while Nakamis gathered small branches and dry leaves to keep the flame alive. They shared a quiet evening, speaking in soft tones about their journey, their pasts, and the hopes they held for the future. Nakamis realized that the plains, while challenging, were also a place of growth and learning. Each obstacle they faced together strengthened her courage and trust in Luke. The night was calm, with only the gentle sounds of the forest surrounding them. Nakamis lay wrapped in her blanket, reflecting on the journey so far. She thought of her family, of the moments of fear and despair, and of the small victories that had brought her this far. Luke's presence was a constant reminder that she was not truly alone, and that even in the most difficult times, human kindness and trust could provide comfort and strength. As she drifted into sleep, she felt a sense of peace. The plains were vast and unpredictable, but with Luke by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their journey was far from over, but the bond they had formed through shared struggles and mutual support gave her the courage to continue. Morning came once again, and the journey continued. The plains stretched endlessly before them, filled with unknown dangers and opportunities alike. Nakamis and Luke moved forward, step by careful step, their trust and companionship growing stronger with each passing day. The road ahead was uncertain, but together, they were determined to find her family and navigate the challenges of the frontier. Through rivers, hills, and forests, they pressed on, learning from each other and the land around them. Nakamis discovered her own strength, resilience, and courage, while Luke found purpose and connection in guiding and protecting her. Each obstacle they overcame became a testament to their teamwork and determination, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, hope and companionship could endure. And as the sun set on another day, casting long shadows across the plains, Nakamis felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She was not alone. She had found a companion, a guide, and a friend. Together, they would continue the journey, facing whatever lay ahead with courage, determination, and trust. The plains stretched endlessly, golden and green under the rising sun, but the air carried a tension that Nakamis could feel deep in her chest. After days of traveling with Luke, she finally saw signs that she was nearing her tribe's territory. Smoke from distant fires rose faintly on the horizon, and the tracks of familiar animals brought back memories of home. Her heart beat faster, a mixture of excitement and fear. She had longed for this moment, but now that it was near, doubt crept in. How would her family and tribe receive her? And how would they react to Luke, a cowboy traveling with her? Luke noticed the change in her demeanor. "You're thinking about them," he said quietly as they guided the wagon along a narrow trail bordered by thick brush. Nakamis nodded, biting her lip. I hope they will accept me. I've been gone so long, and I'm afraid they might think I'm lost forever, or worse." Her voice trailed off. The uncertainty and worry weighed heavily on her. Luke placed a reassuring hand on the wagon's edge. "Whatever happens, you're strong. You made it this far and you'll find your place again, and I'll be here to help if you need me." His words offered comfort, but the young woman knew that the real test lay ahead. The journey had been dangerous and it had taught her courage and resilience, but now she would face the challenge of belonging and trust. As they drew closer, the terrain changed. The plains gave way to gentle hills and clusters of trees, marking the outskirts of her tribe's territory. Nakamis recognized the patterns of the land, the streams she had seen as a child, the rock formations used as landmarks. Her heart leapt with hope and apprehension. "We're close," she whispered, more to herself than to Luke. The first sign of the tribe came in the form of distant voices. Children laughed as they ran along the edge of a clearing, and the sound of drums echoed faintly from a nearby village. Nakamis froze for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. She had imagined this reunion countless times, but hearing it, the life, the joy, the ordinary rhythms of her people, made her realize how much she had missed. Luke stayed silent, letting her process the moment. He could see the mixture of anticipation and fear in her eyes. "Take it slow," he advised gently. "You decide when we go closer." Nakamis nodded, taking a deep breath and gathering her courage. She led the wagon carefully along the path that followed the stream, keeping a watchful eye for familiar faces and landmarks. As they approached the village, Nakamis spotted elders sitting near the central fire, discussing the day's events. Women carried baskets of food and men tended to tasks around the village. She recognized a few familiar faces, distant relatives who had watched over her as a child, but her presence might come as a shock. She wondered if they would be angry, relieved, or wary of the stranger accompanying her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of a young boy, perhaps no older than her brother had been, running toward them. "Nakamis!" he cried, pointing at her with wide eyes. She felt her heart swell with recognition and emotion. He was the first to see her, and his innocent joy sparked a chain reaction. Others began to notice. their expressions shifting from surprise to cautious curiosity. Luke stayed a step behind, giving her space to navigate the reunion. He knew this moment was not about him. Nakamus's family approached, their steps hesitant but growing more confident as they recognized her. Her mother's voice rang out above the others. "Nakamus, is it really you?" Nakamus broke into tears, running forward to embrace her mother. The two held each other tightly, the years of fear, loneliness, and uncertainty dissolving in that single moment of reunion. The elders and other tribe members gathered, their expressions a mixture of relief, curiosity, and suspicion. They had heard of travelers and outsiders, and Luke's presence introduced an unknown element. Nakamus's father stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the cowboy. "Who is this man?" he asked cautiously, his voice firm but not unkind. Nakamus turned to Luke, her hands trembling slightly. He helped me. He guided me through the storm and kept me safe," she explained. "Without him, I might never have found my way back." Her words carried truth and emotion, but she could see the tension in her father's eyes. The tribe had long been wary of outsiders, especially those who roamed the plains as Luke did. Luke stepped forward slowly, his hands open in a gesture of respect. "I mean no harm," he said quietly. "I only wanted to help Nakamus. I did what anyone should do for someone in danger, that is all." His voice was calm and honest, and though the tribe remained cautious, there was a hint of respect in their gazes. For several tense moments, silence hung over the gathering. Nakamus's mother finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "If you truly helped her, then you have shown courage and kindness. But understand, stranger, that trust must be earned here. We protect our own, and we will judge carefully." Luke nodded, accepting the unspoken rules of their culture. He knew he could not demand acceptance. He could only show respect and integrity. Over the next hours, Luke and Nakamus worked together to explain the events of the journey. He recounted how he had found her in the storm, how he had shared food and shelter, and how they had navigated the dangers of the plains. Nakamus added her perspective, speaking of fear, hope, and the strength she had drawn from the companionship. Slowly, the tension in the crowd began to ease. Their words, honest and heartfelt, conveyed not only the story but the bond they had formed. Some tribal members remained wary, questioning Luke's intentions and the presence of a cowboy in their midst. Others, particularly the younger members who had seen him help Nakamus, began to nod in acknowledgement, recognizing the value of his actions. It became clear that acceptance would come gradually, through deeds rather than words. Luke understood this and remained patient, offering assistance without expectation of reward or praise. As the day turned to evening, Nakamus's family invited Luke to share the evening meal with them. It was a simple meal of roasted meat, corn, and fresh vegetables, prepared with care and shared around the central fire. The warmth of the fire, the smell of food, and the communal laughter of the tribe created a sense of normalcy and belonging. For Nakamus, it was a moment of profound relief. She was home, surrounded by her people, yet still able to honor the bond she had formed with Luke. The meal also served as a subtle test of trust. Luke helped with chores, fetching water and assisting with food preparation, demonstrating his respect and willingness to contribute. His actions spoke louder than words, showing that he was not a threat but an ally. Slowly, the elders' expressions softened, and a few even offered small smiles of approval. Nakamus watched this quietly, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. She realized that she had navigated more than just the plains. She had bridged the gap between two worlds. After the meal, Nakamus's mother took her aside. "You have grown strong," she said, her eyes filled with both relief and pride. "And this man, he has proven his heart. We will watch, and in time, we will know if he is to be trusted fully. But for now, you are safe, and that is what matters." Nakamus nodded, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. She had feared rejection, but instead, she found cautious acceptance and hope for the future. Luke and Nakamus spent the rest of the evening near the fire, speaking quietly of the journey ahead. They knew that while this reunion was a significant milestone, challenges still lay ahead. Nakamis would need to reintegrate into her tribe fully, and Luke would eventually continue his own travels. Yet, the events of the day had cemented a bond between them, one built on trust, respect, and shared hardship. As night fell, the tribe settled into their homes, and the plains outside grew quiet under the moonlight. Nakamis lay in her small space near the fire, reflecting on the day's events. The fear and uncertainty that had once dominated her thoughts had been replaced by a sense of belonging and hope. Luke's presence, though unfamiliar to the tribe, had proven invaluable, and she realized that trust and kindness could overcome fear and suspicion. For Luke, the evening was a lesson in humility and patience. He had not expected acceptance, and he understood that his place was not yet permanent. Yet, he had earned respect through his actions, and that mattered more than words. Watching Nakamis reunite with her family, he felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had played a part in restoring her sense of safety and belonging. The night passed with a gentle calm. Nakamis slept with a sense of relief and comfort she had not known in weeks, while Luke kept a watchful eye on the outskirts of the village. The journey had brought them both far, from the storm to the plains, from fear to cautious trust. And though the road ahead would still hold challenges, they had reached a turning point. Nakamis was home, and Luke had proven his integrity. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Nakamis felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced fear, navigated danger, and bridged two worlds. The plains had tested her, and she had emerged stronger, braver, and more resilient. Luke's presence had reminded her that human connection could endure even in the harshest of circumstances. Together, they prepared for the next phase, Nakamis reintegrating fully with her tribe and Luke deciding how his journey would continue. But one truth was clear. The bond forged through shared struggle and mutual respect would remain, no matter the paths they each took. And in that quiet morning light, there was a sense of hope, a belief that courage, kindness, and trust could guide them through the challenges yet to come. The morning sun rose gently over the village, casting golden light on the familiar faces and familiar landscapes of Nakamis's home. The air was filled with the sounds of daily life, children laughing as they ran along the paths, the soft murmur of elders in conversation, and the smell of cooking fires drifting through the air. Nakamis woke with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today felt different, a day of closure, reunion, and new beginnings. She had already taken small steps toward reintegrating with her tribe, but the final moments of reunion still awaited her. Luke had risen early as well, tending to his horse and the wagon. The night had been quiet, and Nakamis felt a calmness she had not known in weeks. She walked to the central fire where her family had gathered, the familiar rhythm of village life surrounding her. Her mother's eyes met hers, filled with warmth, relief, and love. "You are home," she said simply. Nakamis nodded, the tears threatening to spill, and embraced her mother tightly. Her father approached, his expression softened by both pride and relief. "You have returned safely," he said, his voice steady but gentle. "That is what matters most." Nakamis's siblings gathered around, pressing close to her, laughing and crying together as they celebrated her return. In this moment, all her fears of rejection seemed to dissolve. She was accepted, loved, and home. Luke watched quietly from the edge of the gathering. He had been cautious, knowing that his presence might cause unease, yet he had proven himself through action and patience. Nakamis sensed the questions in the eyes of some tribe members, their cautious glances toward him. She knew that acceptance had been earned, not given, and that his kindness and respect had bridged the gap between outsider and friend. As the day went on, Nakamis introduced Luke to her family more formally. She spoke of the journey, of the storm, the rivers, and the obstacles they had overcome together. She described the moments when she had feared she would never see her family again, and how Luke's steady presence had guided her through. Her words were simple but heartfelt, carrying the truth of their shared experiences. The elders listened carefully, nodding and murmuring among themselves. Some were still cautious, wary of outsiders, but the younger members of the tribe, particularly those who had seen Luke's help firsthand, began to show signs of acceptance. They recognized that his actions were genuine and selfless. Luke himself remained humble, answering questions honestly and respectfully, never claiming more than what he had done. Later, Nokomis's father pulled her aside. "You have grown strong and wise," he said, "and this man, though different from us, has shown honor and courage. You must decide how you will honor both your journey and him." Nokomis thought carefully. She had come to rely on Luke's strength and guidance, but she also understood the importance of her place among her people. "I will honor him," she replied softly, "but I must also honor my family and tribe. That is the way I was taught." Her father nodded, pleased with her clarity and thoughtfulness. That afternoon, the village held a small gathering to formally welcome Nokomis home. She wore a simple shawl, adorned with small beads and embroidery, a symbol of her heritage and identity. Luke stood respectfully to the side, observing the customs and rituals. The elders blessed her return, speaking words of guidance and encouragement. The children danced and played around the central fire, and the adults shared stories of the past, weaving Nokomis back into the fabric of their daily lives. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the village, Nokomis and Luke sat together quietly. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought them to this moment of peace and understanding. Nokomis turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I do not know what I would have done without you," she said. "You guided me through the storm, kept me safe, and showed me kindness when I had none. And I am proud of you, of your strength, your courage, and your heart." His words carried weight, for they were simple yet sincere, acknowledging both her journey and the bond they had formed. The evening drew near, and Luke knew it was almost time to continue his own journey. He had responsibilities elsewhere, and the plains were wide and unpredictable. Nokomis understood, though her heart ached at the thought of parting. She had grown attached to his presence, his calm reassurance, and the way he had stood by her through fear and uncertainty. Before he left, Nokomis's mother approached him. "You have proven yourself," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "You have helped my daughter, and you have earned our respect. Go with honor, and may your path be safe." Luke bowed respectfully, acknowledging the trust and acceptance he had received. "Thank you," he said simply. "I will not forget this place, nor the courage of this young woman." Nokomis walked with him to the edge of the village, the soft grass brushing against her feet. She held the reins for a moment, steadying the horse before looking up at him. "You will always have a place here," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. "In my heart and in the hearts of my family." "And you will always be remembered," he replied. "Your courage and spirit have taught me more than I can say." They shared a quiet, meaningful moment, acknowledging the journey they had shared and the bond that had been formed. It was a farewell, but not an end. It was a chapter of growth, trust, and friendship that would last forever. He mounted his horse, glancing back one last time at Nokomis and her family. The village was peaceful, bathed in the soft light of dusk, and the sounds of daily life reminded him of the resilience and strength of those who called this land home. Nokomis waved, her eyes shining with gratitude and love, before turning back to her family. She felt whole again, restored to the place where she belonged, yet forever changed by the journey she had shared with Luke. As he rode away, Luke reflected on the journey. The plains had tested both of them through storms, rivers, and uncertainty, but it had also shown the power of trust, courage, and human kindness. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, yet the memory of Nokomis's strength and the acceptance of her tribe would remain with him, a reminder of the connections that could flourish even in the harshest of circumstances. Nokomis returned to the village, embracing her family and sharing stories of the journey. She spoke of the storm, the muddy plains, and the kindness of the cowboy who had helped her. Her family listened, nodding in understanding and pride. The elders offered guidance, reminding her of the responsibilities she carried as a member of the tribe. Nakamis felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that she had been strengthened by her experiences and that she could now contribute fully to her community. Days passed, and life returned to its familiar rhythm. Nakamis engaged in daily tasks with renewed energy, helping her family, tending to the village, and participating in communal activities. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Yet the memory of Luke's guidance remained, a quiet presence in her thoughts that reminded her of the power of trust and companionship. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of deep purple and gold, Nakamis sat by the fire with her mother. "Life is not always easy," her mother said, "but courage and kindness will guide you. Remember the lessons you have learned and share them with others." Nakamis nodded, reflecting on the journey she had taken, the dangers she had faced, and the bond that had sustained her. She realized that her journey had been about more than survival. It had been about understanding the importance of trust, compassion, and the connections that sustain human life. Luke had been a guide, a protector, and a friend, showing her that even in the harshest environments, kindness could shine. Though the cowboy had left, Nakamis felt his presence in her heart, a reminder of the journey, the storm, and the courage they had shared. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, yet she felt confident that she could face them, drawing strength from her experiences and the love of her family and tribe. As the night deepened, Nakamis looked out over the plains, the moon casting silver light across the land. She thought of Luke riding away, the wind on his face, and the endless horizon before him. A quiet smile spread across her face. She was home, her family was safe, and she had been changed forever by the journey and the bond they had shared. And in that quiet moonlit moment, she whispered softly to herself, "I am not alone. I am never alone." The words carried hope, strength, and the certainty that trust, courage, and kindness would guide her path forward. The plains were still, the fires in the village flickered gently, and life continued its rhythm. Nakamis's journey had reached a significant milestone: reunion, acceptance, and the promise of new beginnings. And though challenges would come, she faced them with courage, wisdom, and the memory of a friendship that had carried her through the storm. The night was peaceful, and Nakamis slept soundly, knowing that the journey had made her stronger, that love and trust had carried her home, and that the bond with Luke, though parting had come, would remain forever in her heart.